welcome to Rabbit Hole Research. This is Chevy Cool Lady bringing you a spooky tale of Ossuaries. Chapels made of human bones, and my, there are so many. We are continuing studying the top 40. This is so interesting. I hope you have enjoyed volumes 1 and 2 so far. We are presenting today volume 3. Number 21, the Brno ossuary, which was discovered in 2001. It is Europe's second largest ossuary and is located in Brno, Czechia. This place was found during a reconstruction of St. Jacob's Square. Quite surprisingly, the bones of over 50,000 skeletons were stuffed under the square in a medieval church. The bones, thought to be from the 16 and 1700s. The bones were dug up from an overcrowded cemetery. We are given the usual narrative. So, I wonder why they thought digging the old bones up and replacing them with the newly dead in the earth. Maybe most of the flesh was rotten off and they wouldn't have to deal with that. Was cremation out of the realm of possibilities? I don't know. If you guys have any information on why they unbury the old ones and replace them with new corpses, please let me know in the comment box below. Anyway, the sheer number of bones in the Brno ossuary is quite astounding. I did learn that these bones were never exposed to sunlight. Due to the overall yellowness of the bones, the deeply yellow probably died of cholera and the red-stained bones died of the plague, most likely. Right now, it ranks in size, just under the catacombs of Paris. And that place is insane. 22 leads us to the skeletons of Waldsassen Basilica in Waldsassen, Germany. Known as the Holy Bodies, skeletons of Christian martyrs who were exhumed from the catacombs of Rome line the halls of this church, dressed in elaborate 18th-century garb and covered in jewels. This is worth looking at. The so-called Holy Bodies were exhumed from the catacombs of Rome between 1688 and 1765. What makes this so unusual is the bones have been dressed in elaborate clothing from the 18th century, covered with jewels and generally look like royalty. I wonder how these corpses were not robbed over the years. In fact, every year the church celebrates the Holy Bodies Fest. Little is known about these bodies and seems very ritualistic to me, especially since it is shrouded with secrecy. Like why these bones were transported to Germany in the first place. This seems very odd to me. This church is famous for a statue of Christ with its arms broken off by a soldier. The armless Christ is seen as a symbol of forgiveness to the pilgrims who travel to pray to the Savior without arms every year. As we get into number 23, the Capuchin Monastery Catacombs. We are about to see some graphic, morbid pictures that seem surreal when viewing. Let me know your thoughts and perceptions, please. If you have not subscribed, do me a solid and subscribe and like. It does a lot to help this channel. I appreciate you all so very much. As we have seen in previous ossuaries, Italy has a very intimate approach to the dead. This particular display seems to lend itself to necromancy. Pinned to the walls, sitting on benches, laying in open coffins, and many more poses lie the fully dressed skeletons of the 8,000 local dead. The catacombs have many tunnels where the hanging dead have been separated by class, customs, and occupation. The oldest core is Silvestro de Gubbio, a friar from 1599. Most of the bodies are mummified, and the most recent addition to the display is a 2-year-old female, laid to rest in 1922. Dubbed Sleeping Beauty for her near-perfect preservation. 24 is Tiny Ossuary. The ossuary sits behind the Church of the Blessed Virgin Mother in the Czech Republic. The ossuary holds about 800 inhabitants. The skulls here are hand-painted with black laurel wreaths. Not all the skulls are decorated. In fact, the 12 skulls that are painted are a mystery to the visitors. But locals say it stems from an old family who traveled from the west. About 6,000 skulls reside at the St. Florian Ossuary in Austria. They belong, presumably to early Christians who wished to be buried next to St. Florian, a Roman martyr. He is the protector from fire and flood. The tomb of a famous Austrian composer was added at a later date. This is a memorial to Anton Bruckner, who loved the organ at the church above. Bruckner was described as a death-obsessed ghoul who had pedophilic tendencies. Now thousands of skulls watch over his graves. 26 is the Eggenberg Charnel House in Austria. This dark place dates back to the 14th century. They say it's a frighteningly beautiful sight. Swirling down in a wide, round cylinder, the charnel holds about 5,800 people. The dates of the deceased range from 1200 to 1405. The central focus is a small pile of skulls, closed off with the longer bones from the legs and arms forming a semicircle around them. The charnel is at the bottom of a pit and is closed off to the public. '27 is a memorial to the Cambodian Civil War, marking the end of a vicious ruler named Pol Pot. From 1975 to 1979, they killed 1.7 million people out of a population of only 8 million. Many of the murdered were dumped into what we now call the killing fields. In Phnom Penh, a memorial was erected to remember those who were killed. Designed after a Buddhist stupa, the memorial has glass sides. It is composed of multiple layers of skulls, most of whom were executed at the site only 50 years ago. There are still a number of pits that were used as mass graves. Some human bones can be seen in the area. The visitors are reminded of the atrocities of the former regime. Number 28 is St. Catherine's Monastery in Egypt. This is located in the vast desert of the Sinai. Without a Bedouin guide, it would be unnavigable. Built by the Byzantine Emperor Justinian in the early 6th century below Mount Sinai. There are fights and disputes about this being the actual Mount Sinai and if the original burning ash is within its gates or not. It seems even the monks sent here were actually sent because they were being punished for a less than pious lifestyle. As they died off, the next generation of scandalous monks created a house of skulls. More functional than decorative, the massive pile of bones speaks to that gruesome end. The grounds of the Ader de Saint Maclou have been steadily used as burial grounds since Roman times. During the Black Death of 1348, when 3/4 of the area's inhabitants died, the site became a burgeoning cemetery. By the 1520s, more room was needed, and in 1533 construction was finished on the east, west, and north above-ground ossuary galleries. The wooden frames of the buildings were ornamented with macabre details: skulls, bones, shovels, pickaxes, cult objects, and other reminders of the Ader's purpose. In 1705, the buildings were emptied and destined to be a school for poor boys. Despite damage from war, revolution, and naughty pupils, the site stands today and is still a fine arts school. For curious corpse seekers looking for remains, there is a mummified cat under glass in the wall near the entrance. The cat was found in the wall, and it is assumed that this was a black cat used to ward off all manner of evil. Although that is not what it means to me. Number 30 brings us to the Ossuary of Portugal. The Chapel of Bones. A 16th century chapel decorated with bones, skulls, and entire bodies hanging from the wall. The Chapel of Bones in Évora, Portugal, is part of the larger Royal Church of St. Francis and was constructed by Franciscan monks in the late 16th century. The chapel's story is a familiar one. By the 16th century, there were as many as 43 cemeteries in and around Évora that were taking up valuable land. Not wanting to condemn the souls of the people buried there, the monks decided to build the chapel and relocate the bones. However, rather than interring the bones behind closed doors, the monks, who were concerned about society's values at the time, thought it best to put them on display. They thought this would provide Évora, a town noted for its wealth in the early 1600s, with a helpful place to meditate on the transience of material things in the undeniable presence of death. This is made clear by the thought-provoking message above the chapel door: "We bones are here, waiting for yours." The purpose of the chapel is made clear by a poem, translated below by Reverend Carlos A. Martins, written by Father Antonio de Asuncio, that hangs from one pillars. Where are you going in such a hurry, traveler? Pause. Do not advance your travel. You have no greater concern than this one, that on which you focus your sight. Recall how many have passed from this world. Reflect on your similar end. There is good reason to reflect if only all did the same. Ponder, you so influenced by fate, among all the many concerns of the world, so little do you reflect on death. If by chance you glance at this place, stop, for the sake of your journey, the more you pause, the further on your journey you will be. Just in case all that death should cause you to despair, at the end of the chapel, above the altar, you can read the Latin phrases, "I die in the light," and "The day that I die is better than the day that I was born." In 1145, in Via Brolo, Milan, a hospital was built near the Santo Stefano Maggiore church. The graveyard, filling with bodies from the new hospital, soon proved insufficient. Not long after, in 1210, a little chamber was built to collect the bones from the hospital, and, in 1269, another small church was constructed near the bone chamber. This definitely looks like a place for dark rituals, but at the same time is gloriously weird because of the artistic displays. Today, the ossuary at San Bernardino alla Ossa is located at the end of a short corridor to the right of the church's entrance. The vault is decorated with frescoes from Sebastiano Ricci, dating from 1695. The building's walls are completely covered in bones and skulls, some from the old ossuary, some from other local graveyards. They also decorate the doors and the pillars. Some have speculated that the bones belong to martyrs killed by heretics in St. Ambrose's time. The bones, however, mostly seem to have come from the patients of the ancient Ospedale del Brolo, the local hospital, from monks that operated the hospital, and from people who died in prison. Ones of 130,000 soldiers from World War II, and area of less than 20 square kilometers, an area roughly half the size of Manhattan. There were 700,000 casualties, and some 230,000 men died during the nearly year-long Battle of Verdun in World War I. According to Meg's Guide to Ossuaries, warfare on the scale, with such a machine efficiency of killing was new, World War I being the first industrialized war. As new war machines like the machine gun, poisonous gas, and thousands of rounds of artillery ammunition were introduced to the battlefield, the death toll rose accordingly, 8,500,000 military dead. And of course, so did the number of bodies left over. Interestingly, unlike the neatly stacked piles in the catacombs or in church ossuaries, the bones of the dead soldiers are simply in heaping piles, which strangely feels more appropriate for the violent and tragic way they died, and helps illustrate the sheer scale of death during World War I. The windows of the ossuary appear on pile after pile of bones, which you can walk amongst, with piles of bones divided up by the region in the 20 square kilometer Verdun area where they were found. Engraved bricks each bear a soldier's name, though there is by no means a brick for every soldier, and tens of thousands of these soldiers go nameless. So sad. 33 takes us to Portugal and to the Capela de Osso, the bone chapel. This small chapel is built of human bones and decorated with a golden skeleton. How nice. It looks so normal on the outside. Whoa. Just look inside. The inscription over the door reads, "Stop here and think of the fate that will befall you." 1816. A helpful reminder put in place by the Carmelite monks who built the chapel that year on the grounds of the larger church dating to 1719. It is not merely decorated with bones. The walls are constructed from femurs with mortar. Skulls and other bones are placed on the interior at regular intervals, including grinning down from the barrel-vaulted ceiling, giving the place a pleasing, yet spooky, symmetry. The highlight of the ossuary is a complete skeleton covered in gold that hangs at the front of the chapel. The practice of moving bones from cemetery plots into ossuaries after a period of time in the ground, usually 7 to 10 years, was common throughout Catholic Europe until recently. The bones in this ossuary are the remains of 1,245 monks whose bones were displaced when the ossuary was built. There are several other bone chapels in Portugal, the most famous being in Évora. A pyramid. Really? Now this looks sus to us. But let's see what the narrative says. In 1849 the now Italian city of Novara was the site of a battle against Austrian forces that left countless dead on both sides of the struggle. Now the ashes of soldiers from both sides are held in a stone pyramid guarded by a bronze bird. There have been a number of skirmishes known as the Battle of Nevera over the centuries, but the final such engagement took place in the mid-1800s when an Austrian force tried to take the city, which was then in the Piedmont region. The Austrians succeeded in their assault and drove the Piedmontese back. However, instead of coming under the heel of Austrian rule, the city was eventually incorporated into unified Italy. Politics aside, a number of men died on both sides of the battle. To remember both the battle and those who died, the ossuary of Bicocca being a section of Nevera, was built in the late 1870s. The bone house was built in the style of a tight Egyptian-esque pyramid with a bronze bird erupting out just over the door to the structure. While hard to confirm, the pyramid is said to contain the remains of both fighting forces as a sign of both respect and unification. A large cross has since been delineated in the masonry blocks near the top of the pyramid above the bird, giving the strange landmark a more properly funereal feel. I would not be surprised if more nefarious practices are carried on under the memorial. It just looks out of place. 35 is Santa Maria dell'Erosion e Morte in Rome, Italy, with skulls carved above the doorway and winged skeletons etched into plaques outside. The exterior of Santa Maria dell'Erosion e Morte, Saint Mary of Eulogies and the Dead, suits its macabre name. There are skeletons set in the wall, etched skulls stacked on shelves, bones piled by the altar and made into a cross. Even the chandeliers are made with human vertebrate. A scythe lurks near the altar. What the heck? The church was established in 1576 to provide a proper burial for abandoned corpses. While it used to include huge vaults where over 8,000 bodies were buried, most of the vaults were destroyed during other construction in 1886. This chamber is all that remains. Number 36 is the Catacombs of San Sebastian in Rome, Italy. Boasts to have Jesus' footprints, also is the first catacombs in the world, we are told. The martyred remains of San Sebastian were buried at the site in 350, and a basilica was erected over the grounds to honor the saint in the early 4th century. At the time, the subterranean burial area became known as Ad Catacombs, which means near the hollows, due to the excavated mines near the site. This was the first use of term catacombs, and it has since signified underground Christian burial chambers. The basilica is dedicated to San Sebastian, who was martyred, and it houses the arrow that allegedly struck San Sebastian during his murder. In an underground crypt beneath a Jesuit church in the small town of Kladovi, Czechia, the mortal remains of Jesuit priests and local noblemen were sealed up in oaken coffins in the late 1700s, and they're still on display today. Between 1676 and 1783, over 200 bodies were laid to rest in the crypt chambers. The bodies were laid on a bed of hops inside oak coffins which were labeled with lead nameplates. Because of the clever engineering of these catacombs, including a series of ventilation ducts and wells, the air circulated through all the passages and chambers, and gradually the bodies were mummified and preserved, leaving their original clothing, shoes, and jewelry intact. Unfortunately, in earlier years, reconstruction of the church resulted in an alteration of the crypt atmosphere, and many of the bodies began to decay. In 1937, 140 bodies that were too badly damaged to remain on display were buried collectively in the city graveyard. The site in the graveyard is marked with a commemorative stone. 38 brings us to an old Gothic church. We see the Masonic floor indicating a place of rituals. We also see the Knight of the Templar Cross. St. Stephen's Cathedral has grand architecture. But there is something to be seen below as well. Just beneath the stone floors lie the skeletal remains of over 11,000 souls. The vast Stephansdom crypt is divided into a number of smaller crypts and catacombs, and is still an active burial spot. In another section, known as the Ducal Crypt, the organs of princes, queens, and emperors are kept. Along with some bodies and hearts, over 60 jars of imperial intestines rest in the Ducal Crypt. Not long ago, the seals on one jar broke, leaking 200-year-old visceral fluid onto the floor. The stink was apparently so awful that it took a day or two before someone was willing to go down and address the situation. Yuck! There are sections of the crypt scattered with piles of disorganized bones and deteriorating coffins. 39 bring us to Czechia and the Czech's Capuchin crypt. This is a 17th century crypt donning a tile mosaic of St. Francis of Assisi with mummified monks and a very well-dressed coffin reliquary of St. Clementine inside. Her blood is in a vessel at her feet. It's quite weird, with the monks looking like they are laying down in torture. The corpse of one woman is frozen in a stricken pose, and a neat label informs the visitor that she was accidentally buried alive. Such errors were common during a time when paralysis and coma were little understood, and more than one such unfortunate in the crypt met this fate. 24 monks lie perfectly preserved, arranged in rows across the floor. All are clad in robes and a number are draped with rosaries or clutching a crucifix. A few lie peacefully, but others have fear. I hope you all have enjoyed learning about some weird and creepy history with me. Please leave your thoughts in the comment box, and if you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. It helps me out so much. Thanks. Number 40 is the crypt beneath Saint Joseph de Carmis in Paris, France. The recovered bones of martyrs slaughtered during the Terror are on display in this church crypt. There you can see the battered remains and bloodstains of some lesser-known victims of the Reign of Terror, a group collectively known as the Martyrs of September. The martyrs were a group of priests, seminarians, bishops, and, most famously, the Archbishop of Valls. They were rounded up by a mob of sans-culottes and imprisoned in the convent near St. Joseph's after refusing to take an oath that undermined papal authority. The mob's punishment for this transgression was quick and especially brutal. They began killing their prisoners on September 2, 1792, when they bashed in the archbishop's head, stabbed him, and trampled the body. The following day, the mob set up a kangaroo court to try the remaining prisoners. Martyrologist John Fox described them as soaked in blood up to the elbows, with executioners and judges freely subbing in for one another without bothering to wipe the gore off their hands. Some skulls sit in niches, while others are stacked in a cabinet above the epitaph. Having preferred death to violating the holy law of God, they were massacred. Thanks for watching. See you next video.